podcast, where Mainers tell their stories, unfiltered.
Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and you are watching the Muddy Waters Podcast. The Muddy Waters Podcast, as you all know, exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on here in our state by interviewing people from around the state, whether they be candidates, just individuals, moms, dads, parents, business owners, or in this case, journalists. And so today we have with us one of the newest hires, I believe, if not the newest hire, to the Maine Wire, John Fetherston.
Hey,
did I say it right? Did I say
yeah,
the last
absolutely.
name?
Yeah, thanks. It's an honor to be with you guys today.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you, number one, coming on the podcast, but also like making the crazy decision to get involved in working for a conservative blogger organization. To quote Shenna Bellows' description of the Maine Wire, I just love to highlight that.
Now, wait a minute. Give me my, because she thinks I'm running against her for governor, and I work for a conservative blog.
Oh,
how confused the young lady really is. Yes.
Yeah, it's one of those things. We were having a conversation. Where was that? I don't even remember where I was, but we were having a conversation yesterday about Shenna Bellows, and we were also connecting it to the TV show The Office, right? And basically, people were suggesting that Shenna Bellows effectively is Michael, and I was like, that's interesting because there's a scene where Michael is running for applying to be the next level up in the company he was applying, and people are talking about whether or not he's going to get the job, and they're like, well, he's not qualified for the job, and then they're like, well, he's not qualified for his current job either, and I was like, perfect. That is a perfect description of Shenna Bellows, right? Yeah, so here we are. She's there. You're here, and so are you originally from Massachusetts? I know you moved here from there. Is that where you're originally from?
I grew up in the Midwest. I've traveled around a lot. I've lived in a lot of different places: New Jersey, California, the Carolinas. But I spent most of my adult life in Massachusetts. Where I was in public office most of my life. I'm self-described, political nerd, public servant. And so I held many different elected positions in Massachusetts. And I thought I would, come to quiet Maine and things would be peaceful and quiet. And I have to tell you, as screwed up as Massachusetts is, and Massachusetts is very screwed up, Maine is running a very close second, if not pulling into the lead, because I'm just amazed by the dysfunction in Maine government right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe. It's so interesting because we're as the conservative movement, and I think this goes to show how sadly little faith people in Maine have in the Maine Republican Party, right? But like, what's going on in Augusta is so like bad that it's like you kind of have to not be looking to not see it, right? And yet, what do? We keep electing these people. Because I think either there's a lower than there should be trust in Maine Republicans, or people are just so ideologically captured by the nonsense of the left that they just keep electing incompetent people who put incompetent people in positions of leadership.
Well, I want to expand on that a little bit, Chuck, because I'm sure everybody's a nice person and well-intentioned, because, anybody who wants to run for public office is generally intended and think that they're going to be the best person. But lack of professionalism on top of just obvious corruption is just startling to an outsider coming in. Like I said, I've had a lot of, fights with, Elizabeth Warren. I fought, nose to nose with Elizabeth Warren for years. I've fought with the current governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey. I've been a whistleblower on some of the atrocities that she's done. I've gone toe to toe with Ed Markey over the years, and Catherine Clark. And, and they're pretty high profile and pretty high dysfunctional. But then, I come to Massachusetts and, like I said, for all I know, Shenna Bellows is the nicest lady in the world, because every picture I see with her is with, somebody who's, 40 years older than her. She doesn't seem to be resonating with her demographic running for governor, because everybody I see in a picture is older than me, and I'm pretty old. But what I just see corruption on top of apathy, on top of dysfunction. And I go, do you see what's happening here? I mean, Massachusetts had a lot of residents migrate to Maine during COVID. That's obvious, driven up the housing cost. You could say that was a negative, but glass is always half full in my world. I see that as a positive. That was an opportunity for Maine to get into the 21st century a little bit and embrace, development, smart growth, solve the housing problem. And instead, I hear, all these people are moving from New York and Rhode Island and Massachusetts up to Maine, and they're ruining Maine. No, your elected leaders are allowing Maine to be ruined because of the corruption, the apathy, the unwillingness to work towards a common goal. But, getting back to Bellows, I first start with the Maine Wire. And my first week, she gives me the gift from God. The Amazon ballots show up in Newburgh. And we go to the press conference, and she thinks I'm running against her for governor. And then, takes a shot at Steve Robinson, who has done enormous work in Maine to get the truth out on so many different stories. And, she just degrades him as a common blogger. Well, okay, he's a common blogger, but this is on every national news story, across the country, and you just want this to go away. And I've said this in a couple other places, but I don't think it can be ignored. She holds a press conference in Augusta by herself.
Right.
No staff. Where's the governor? Where are the elected leaders? Where is her support group? She goes out there by herself, gives a pathetic performance, accuses people of crimes that she hasn't been able to prove how many, weeks later, takes a swipe at Steve Robinson, takes a swipe at elected officials, and then calls it a day and hopes that the general public will forget. The general public hasn't forgotten, and it's just very obvious to anybody who really wants to pay attention. Is she a nice person? She probably is. Is she qualified to be the governor of Maine? Heck no. Heck no.
Is she qualified for her current position? Heck no. I think she could work the register at Hannaford's.
Well, debate you on that one as well.
But I mean, she could do a great job running a propaganda news media source. Probably, I think she probably could handle that. Maybe, I don't know. But
people tell me she did well in some of her previous capacities that she had. So some people do say that she did well, and I just kind of look at that with a little bit of amazement. But here's the thing: it was a simple thing for an experienced, poised, professional, let's say a politician, to handle. Okay, she could have just come out that day. This is wrong. This is what happened. This is what we did to fix it. This is how I can ensure, that you have trust in your election process. I'm in charge. I'm going to fix this. And instead, what we've gotten is 8 weeks of deflection, no follow-up. She goes and hires another courier company and fires UPS and doesn't have any justification for that. And then comes out on election day and says, yeah, UPS is running the investigation. Wait a minute. The company that you fired to cover your butt is now running the investigation, and we still don't have any updates. She just ran out the clock and got the election done. And she's hoping that nobody remembers in June during the primary that this happened. That's exactly what happened. And Mainers should be mad. Democrats, Republicans, independents, socialists. Heck, you've got a communist running for a United States Senate, as a Democrat. Everybody should be mad because an election, if you don't have election integrity, you have nothing.
No, absolutely. It's obviously complete nonsense in my mind that that she has not done anything in any way that makes any sense, right? She's not done all the things that she should have done. Again, that press conference, she basically went through painstaking efforts to explain how ballots get mailed out and all this other stuff and how there are these checks and balances, and just completely deflects on the reality of the concern and just tries to make it look like there's absolutely no concern. And it's like when you're faced with a problem, if you're a professional, right, there is an element where you do want to like put people at ease, but in order to put people at ease, you have to also be honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to say, look, I totally understand why people are concerned with this. Here are the reasons why given our checks and balance, but like she just completely wrote off the concern from the very beginning and basically suggested that anybody that's concerned is a conspiracy theorist, which what does that do? even if you're right, even if she's telling the truth, right? It doesn't put people at ease. It makes people think, what else are you trying to hide? And so like she just handled, I mean, and I haven't seen everything that she's done, but like just did not handle it well. And especially when she was on the Ray Richardson show, the way that she's like, bad actors, bad actors, bad actors, you know, and Ray asked her, do you have any proof of bad actors? Well, no, the state police are handling the investigation,
but
those bad actors will be caught. And it's like, wait, come on. Like, it's one or the other. Either you know something or you don't know something. And if you don't know something, you probably ought to be more careful about making these essentially these allegations against some supposed bad actor.
Well, she was insinuating that Steve Robinson was the bad actor.
Who knows?
Yeah.
No, yeah.
I mean, if you were in the room and you were I had other members of the media going, what is she doing? Why is she going after Steve? I mean, literally other news organizations saying that during the event. As bad as that ballot thing was, and trust me, it was bad. These Stop Trump signs at the election polls on election day, she green-lighted that as well, too.
Green-lighted that while they were turning away people with MAGA hats. And the reason that they were saying that you could have the Stop Trump stuff is because they said, well, if somebody's not on the ballot, then you can wear stuff related to them. Well, unless it's pro-Trump stuff, and then you can't.
That is correct. But look at who that organization is, and then look at Ms. Bellow's campaign finance disclosures and tell me that that's ethical as well, too.
Well, this is why it's obviously like an ethical dilemma is an understatement, but it's unethical basically to be the Secretary of State and oversee an election in which you're participating, right? Where you're going to be on the ballot, and even leading up to that, right? Because now there are all these questions that anybody now a lot of people aren't going to do research. This is part of the problem. And I wonder if this was the case the other places that you've been, but here in Maine, it seems like people don't pay attention to what's actually going on in our state. We're so focused. We're driven by both local media and mainstream and like national media to focus on what's happening in Washington and ignore what's happening here. But if people are paying attention, they're going to look if you do a little bit of research and look at the ballot questions, how she wrote them, these were clear election interference in the way in which she wrote the questions in preparation for, knowing that this might potentially hurt her in her run next year. Right. And so like, that's even if that's just a narrative, like, let's say this is just a narrative we're spinning. It's not, it's the truth. But like, even if it is only a narrative, that's potentially damaging, right? Not only to you, but to your entire party. Anybody who doesn't call you out on that, it's bad. And like, yes, there have been other secretaries of state that have run for governor, like the woman who ran against Carrie Lake. I can't remember her name, out in Arizona. I remember, and won. There have been other situations in which it's happened, but that doesn't mean that it's good or wise. And I think sometimes people are like, well, other people did it, so that makes it okay. It's like, at the very least, there's an appearance of and a concern about election integrity and whether or not the person who's overseeing the elections. I mean, right now, Republicans don't trust any Democrat, right? At this point, overseeing elections, for the most part, I think it'd be hard for us to trust one. But definitely not the person who's running, and that's just really concerning. And like the fact, and she just, again, talk about deflection. She just ignores that as though there's nothing to be, obviously I would never.
One thing that really has stood out to me, once again, being the new guy in the room, I was at a press conference in Portland with at the Red Cross with Susan Collins, and people were waiting for everybody to come out, and Angus King was there as well too. And I asked Mr. King, hey, what do you think about the ballot thing? And I have to commend him. His honest answer was, I know nothing about it. I don't know anything about it. I'm like, it's the biggest story in Maine right now. How can you not know? He was like, I honestly don't know anything about it. So do I attack him for not being aware, or do I attack him, or commend him for his honesty, which was shocking to me. But as we're waiting, Susan Collins,
just be nice to the poor old man. He's I'll
give him that. Very nice man, but if you don't stand for anything, what do you stand for? But we're waiting for Susan Collins to come out, and the members of the media are like, "Oh, did you find the ballots? You find the ballots?" Everybody in the media thinks it's funny. Everybody in the media is aware of the situation. Did you see any other news organization other than the Maine Wire dig into the story? And the answer is no. And there's your problem in Maine. Your media appears to not be bipartisan. It doesn't appear to be normal. It doesn't appear to be balanced. And then you hear that Janet Mills pays, for people to say nice things about her in the media. The problem is you've got people who are working probably 2 or 3 jobs to pay the bills because you have, the highest electric increases in the country here. You're trying to put food on the table. You're trying to get your kids a good education. And you turn on the news and you're not getting news. You're getting public relations.
Propaganda.
It's propaganda, public relations. And that's where, and yes, I, defend the team here. The Maine Wire will investigate stuff. The Maine Wire will look into stuff. The Maine Wire hey, trust me, we would report just as much Republican fraud as we would Democrat fraud. We're here to provide information for people, and you're not getting that in your main media. The Bangor Daily News, you cannot tell me is fair. You cannot tell me that it's fair.
Are they not they seem to be like the most fair of the main news outlets that are aside from the Maine Wire. I mean, I agree that they're not fair and they're definitely partisan, right? They will say they're nonpartisan, right? Because the Democrat ideology is just the truth. It's not partisan. That's what they do in the corporate world as well. It's this nonsense, but they're obviously partisan. But maybe they're not as partisan as some of these other, like the Portland Press Herald and some of these other news sources, I would say. Am I right?
That it's one man's opinion as a person who looks at it objectively. Because listen, as a self-described conservative, I like to watch content that I don't agree with. I will watch CNN, I will watch MSNBC, I will watch Bloomberg, just because I want to understand what people are thinking, how things are being portrayed. But I look at the media here in Maine and go, no, it's even worse than like some of the national media. I'm not talking quality. I'm not talking the way it looks. I'm just talking that it's very partisan.
Yeah, no, it definitely is very partisan. And I actually had this conversation on election night with a guy from the Kennebec Journal. They ended up a part of what I said ended up getting published in the Portland Press Herald, which was that what was the part he got really excited when I said this, and so he really quickly wrote it down, which was that Shenabellos might as well have worded the question, "Do you want to murder puppies?" And so I got quoted on that, so that was fun. It was an accurate quote. That's what I said. But that's how the question was asked, essentially. But I was telling him effectively that, like, I don't like, I'm actually not somebody who likes the spotlight on me, right? And so, like, this idea of doing a podcast was a very frightening thing. But why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why have I run for office? I didn't want to run for office. I didn't want to get involved in politics. Why am I here? Well, I'm here primarily because the mainstream media has decided that it's okay being a propaganda arm of the Democrat Party rather than doing their job. If they actually just did their job, the Maine Wire wouldn't need to exist and my podcast wouldn't need to exist, right? But that's why these organizations exist. So they can be mad at them and upset about the fact that people are doing something, or they could just do their job and actually objectively report the news, and we don't need to exist anymore, right? Like, that's just the reality. I mean, pulled the bottle maybe out of the you open you've opened the can, essentially, now, whatever I'm trying to say, pull the genie out of the bottle. And so we're here. I'm probably not going away even if things change, and same thing with the Maine Wire. It's here, it exists. But the reality is they're the reason that we exist. And we've had to, because if they were effectively doing their job, number one, they'd be holding Democrat legislators and people in power in check by reporting accurately on them, which would make them behave differently. And policies would be different, right? And different people would be getting elected because they'd be more, if they were more objective. But they've chosen to be the propaganda arm to the left, which is why we're here. But
to that point, let me
go for it.
I'll tell you, when I was a selectman in Massachusetts, I was the chairman of the board of selectmen in Ashland, Massachusetts for many years. Every meeting, and I stress the word every meeting, there was a local reporter. And I wouldn't say anything different if he was there, if he wasn't there, because if you know me, I just wouldn't. But I liked it because if it's written down, it happened. If it's not, it didn't happen. And since COVID and since the demise of local newspapers and local media, you've had politicians run unchecked for too long. And I see a lot of that in Maine as well, too.
Mhm.
Like, why is the Maine Wire here? Oh, because we're here to report on a story. Like, I've been reporting on the Cumberland County ICE contract with the sheriff, and last night they voted 3-2 to continue their relationship with ICE, and it was more of a financial decision than I think it was, an ICE decision. But the vitriol that I would get from people like, why are you here? Why are you covering this? Because it's a news story. It's a news story. And I didn't get that from the commissioners. I got that mostly from the anti-ICE people. But it's reassuring that people are so mad that the Maine Wire is here covering a story. It knows that I'm working in the right place, is what I'm saying. So, but.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in the media and you're saying things that people don't want you to say, I mean, reporting on things that people don't want you to report on. I mean, probably there's a good reason for you to be there. And that whole situation was kind of ridiculous as well. I do want to get into like your past, where you've come from, like let you kind of tell your story a little bit. But yeah, that whole situation with ICE was like, it was the fact that the fact that they would want. Again, my understanding of the situation is basically that our contract, we have a contract with ICE where ICE pays us based on the people that we hold for them to come pick up that they need to, essentially process for deportation. Essentially, is the understanding.
$100 a day per person.
And the only thing that would change if we didn't have that contract is that we wouldn't get paid.
Correct.
Right. So they'd still be being housed there. There's nothing that we could do about that because of the way that the prison system works. And so this vote was literally about whether or not we wanted to say no to the money and the contract, rather than it wasn't going to stop anybody from being held there for ICE.
Nope.
And all these crazy people apparently wanted us to pay more money and pay to house these people to keep these people ourselves, essentially. Well, which would have raised taxes, right, for everybody in Cumberland County.
Quite a bit, a large percentage it would have raised, and it still would have been held, and they still would have been doing what they were doing, and probably lawsuits would have come down. So, ultimately, I think the commissioners made the right decision last night to continue to honor the contract.
Yeah. Again, it's just a really wild situation. And then one of the interesting things about it, because we were prepared to and we had some people email the commissioners and stuff like that, but we didn't send people over to give testimony because we were told that they weren't going to be giving people time to speak, and then they gave people time to speak.
Well,
during public comment.
I mean, I've covered the last, is it 4 or 3 meetings, and each time the crowds have gotten bigger and more vocal and louder and stuff. I think it was wise last night that they let them speak, because there were so many people there that it could have disrupted the meeting. And even when they did give them more than enough time to make their case, when they finally did cut it off, people were still like, "Oh, you're disrespecting us. You're not letting us speak." No, nobody new came to the podium with a new item in like 20 minutes. So I commend them for the way they handled it. I commend them for the way they, were willing to listen and hear people, and then even thank people for coming. The meeting before, people were actually banging on the windows and chanting outside so much that the meeting was actually disrupted. So last night's crowd was much more, appropriate. So.
Well, that's good, at least. But yeah, so one of the things that I like to do with guests, especially when it's like kind of the first time that they've been on, usually we start this at the beginning, but we had fun stuff to talk about, is just kind of hear about like who you are, where you come from, what caused you to get into the world of politics, and then what essentially brought you to Maine. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the question. What caused me to get into politics, and like I said, I was always a lifelong public servant. I've been like president of Rotary clubs. I've always been on different boards and philanthropic boards, YMCA, kids. But when my oldest son, who is now almost 30, was born, he's on the autism spectrum. His preschool teacher called home one day and said, "Hey, everybody's going to the zoo tomorrow except for your kid." What? What do you mean? "Well, your kid's special and he'll disrupt the fun for everybody else and he can't go." Okay, well, let me pull papers and run for school committee, because if you're going to treat my kid, so pulled papers and ran for school committee and thought, hey, okay, I like this. I like doing this. But probably the hardest job I ever had in politics anyway. I commend anybody who wants to be on the school committee, because you go to the grocery store, can I talk to you? Oh, geez. An hour later, get home, the wife's like, where you been? But so I commend anybody who runs for the school committee, because it's a hard job. And then I said to myself, I really enjoy public service, and I really enjoy helping people quietly. And that's always been my thing. I like to help people quietly. I don't have to talk about how I helped, the little old lady keep her lights on or something like that. I ran for the Board of Selectmen. And like I said, I served a long time as chair of the Board of Selectmen, really got into that and realized that, this was my calling, to be a public servant, to quietly help people, to network throughout the state. I got a couple different governor appointments. I was actually for 16 years a housing commissioner in Massachusetts, a Republican working in affordable housing. Always made for an interesting a night in the meetings, and then
was it like a Ron Swanson like thing?
A little bit. Once again, it was just like, hey, we agree to disagree. Let's work for a common bond and never forget who actually we're working for. We're working for that low-income senior. We're working for that disabled vet. We're working for the special needs person whose family has died and they have no other place to live, and we've got to figure out a situation that we can house these people. I was also a governor appointee to the Massachusetts Area Planning Council. So, road projects, turnpikes, building, setbacks and stuff. So I'm pretty versed in, local government, state government. I was chairman of the Board of Health for many, many years. And that's actually how I got engrossed with Steve Robinson and how I first met Steve Robinson. We had a problem with a man who lived in another town, was an activist. I was kind of going after our chair of the Board of Health at the same time that activist was going after Steve's boss, Kirk Minahan. And that's how Steve and I had to come together and to work on a couple projects. And then fast forward, 10 years, and here I am in Maine, and happy to be here in Maine. And, just excited about the opportunity to make Maine a better place. Because, Maine has so much to offer. And it's easy to come on a podcast and go, oh, everything's terrible. No, the glass is not half full. The glass is 3/4 full. And that's why I think I get a little frustrated, because if you get out the crowd, get some good people, at the top here, Maine can be, one of the greatest states in the country, and it should be one of the greatest states in the country. So that's why I'm excited to be here.
Well, and it was. If you go back to the 90s, we actually had one of the best education systems in the country, and that's one of the things that's one of the most frustrating. And this is when I was going to school, because I was born like early 80s, so like the 90s is when I did the majority of my schooling. Graduated from high school in 2002, and the education system here in the state of Maine was actually, really, really good. I mean, not perfect,
Sure,
but really high quality education, especially compared to where it is today. But Maine is a great place and has a lot of potential, but we have to actually elect people who are competent and are not ideologically captured by nonsense. And that's unfortunately where we're at. And one of the things I want to kind of come back to, and if I didn't do this, I think people would call me out on it later. And also it's my own thought, because you made the comments about why people in Maine are so frustrated with people who are moving here from other states. And I think it's because of the fact that we believe, if you look at the demographics in terms of voter registration, the vast majority of the people that are coming from those other states are coming from Democrat states, and they're pushing Maine more Democrat, because people, so this is where hey, look, if you're a conservative and you come here from Massachusetts, we love it. Unfortunately, love it might be aggressive for some people here in Maine, but we'll definitely tolerate it.
Right.
But it's more the frustration with, actually there's a twofold frustration here. There's one that all these people coming here are driving up the cost of housing, which is probably the most significant factor in the cost of living. And then the second thing that they're doing is they're largely voting Democrat. And so for instance, you look at 2016 versus 2024 in terms of the presidential race. In 2016, it's hard. You can make some arguments about who is the worst candidate, Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton. I think Kamala Harris is probably the worst of the two, because Hillary was evil, I would say, but competent evil. So like Kamala was incompetent and evil. And so like, not only was she going to do damage on purpose, she was going to do it by accident, if that, if that makes sense. Either way.
We dodged 2 bullets.
Oh my gosh.
2 bullets.
Oh gosh. Yeah. So anyway, but you look at 2016 Maine voting records, right? And Trump lost Maine in 2016 by 2.5%.
Mm-hmm.
In 2024, he lost Maine by 6.5%. That's a 4% shift. And, there are a lot of other factors to play in. So it's not completely a migration issue. I do think it is. I think people from Maine have actually also, like conservatives, have left the state. So there's an element to that impacts that. There's the fact that Trump didn't really campaign in Maine at all, whereas in 2016 he had actually done some campaigning in Maine, where he kind of sort of a little bit did some campaigning in northern Maine. He wasn't here himself, but I think he sent people to campaign with Austin Terrio and stuff like that so he could win that, but very, very little. And so like but like the trend is more Democrat, and it's believed that a significant portion of that is the migration issue of people moving here from other places. And then the increase in the cost of housing. And so through that migration, I think too, many more people who are much more in favor of like quote unquote climate change concerns.
Green energy.
Yeah, pushing for green energy, exactly. Which is not really as green as they think it is if they did the research. But they think they're doing something good for the environment, which is great.
It's laws that make you feel good. Yeah,
that's exactly right. They're voting in such a way that will make them feel better about themselves, not will help our state be better.
Not that I ever like to talk about myself, but I want to back you up a little bit because you brought up the word migration. Because before I moved to Maine, and I told you I was a housing commissioner in Massachusetts, and because I got kind of pulled into Massachusetts is the only state in the nation, one out of 50, that has what they call right to housing, right to shelter law. And what that means is that if you come to the state, that the state is obligated to give you a roof over your head and help you with that. And that's what the Biden administration, along with the Healy administration in Massachusetts, exploited. So they brought thousands upon thousands of immigrants from Venezuela, from Haiti, mostly, to Massachusetts, and then put them up in what we called the Healy hotels, or as what I called them as the Healy hotels, which were 4-star hotels, and everything, Chuck, and I stress you the word everything, was free. The rooms, the Wi-Fi, 3 meals a day, healthcare, mass health. They actually had a bus that would come to the hotels and provide free healthcare. You need an Uber ride anywhere, to the grocery store, to the drugstore, to your immigration hearing. No questions asked. Everybody would pay for it. Everybody got a free cell phone. Everybody got a free iPad. Everybody got free clothes. Everybody got a free winter coat and hats and gloves, to the tune of about $4 billion.
A year?
No, in total. It's been about 2.5 years. Right now it's about cost of $4 billion. And you say, well, how does that equate to what we're seeing? I've been working on a story up in Lewiston recently, and a gentleman from just got elected to the city council, and he doesn't live in his ward. And go to the Maine Wire, check out the stories. It's on the front page of the Maine Wire, and go and check it out. But you look at what has happened to Lewiston, and Lewiston has had a heavy immigration, flux as well too. You can see that, and you see that in Massachusetts. And this is not anti-immigrant. This is not because about 98.5% of the immigrants that I work with were really, really good. But one of the big stories that the Maine Wire did is that when I was running one of these Healy hotels or migrant shelters, a man impregnated his own 13-year-old daughter inside the shelter. And because the Healy administration didn't want any bad news out of this, This man wasn't even arrested. They had me transfer him to another shelter. We put the young lady in custody of DCF, and she ended up having the baby, and now the taxpayers are paying for that as well, too. But for 8 months, and if it hadn't been for the Maine Wire breaking this story, this man would have never been arrested. And this story kind of went national. You can just, go to the Maine Wire, you can look at it, or some of the national media outlets picked it up. The Daily Wire picked it up. Fox News picked it up. And so after, keeping it in the spotlight, 8 months later, this man was finally arrested, and now he's serving a 10-year sentence. He has an ICE detainer on him. But you have to look at, what is going on, the impacts of this mass migration, especially in the Northeast, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. You see it a lot in Maine. And I see no plan for it, because I've gone to the migrant shelter in Portland, and it's easier to get into Fort Knox than it is into that place. So what are they hiding? What are they keeping quiet there? What is the plan? And that was the big thing in Massachusetts. There was no plan, because what they were doing is they were incentivizing landlords. Hey, take this Haitian family. We'll give you $5,000 and we'll pay half of their rent for 3 years for you. The landlords are like, okay, okay, I can rent this apartment. I get guaranteed payment. I get a little bonus. I'll do it. 2 months later, I would get a phone call. You told me there were going to be 4 people here. Now I've got 9 people here. I've got 4 cars in the front yard. I've had to replace the refrigerator twice. They've got broken pipes in the place. What's going on? Mad at me. And I'm like, hey, call the governor. This is her program. It's not my program. So what my question is, okay, in a year from now, when that subsidy money runs out, what happens? Are you going to have mass homelessness because people aren't paying their bills? Like, the landlords were getting mad with us because you can't evict people if you get a partial payment. So they were getting the money from the state, but the people inside the apartment weren't paying it. So evictions. You're going to have apartments that are probably not in good working order. And then you're going to have a massless homeless thing. So what are they going to, if you get kicked out of your place in Massachusetts, what are you doing? You're probably going to go to Maine. You're probably go to Portland. Portland's got a really good GA assistance program there, and they're going to come. There is no plan there. So people need to be aware of it, and people have to be aware that happening in their backyards, and they have to pay attention.
Well, the plan is exploiting the American taxpayer, right? That is the plan. The plan is like nonprofits and other organizations profiting off of the American taxpayer, the Maine taxpayer, the Massachusetts taxpayer. And it's like what's really unfortunate. Like, I think part of the other plan, right? Like what's interesting is the left tries to pretend like they're trying to eliminate racism, right? For instance, because I feel like you can't. It's hard to talk about migration without talking about the problems that stem from it into the area of racism, right? Like you said, you're not anti-immigrant, right? I'm not anti-immigrant. I think most of our conservatives are not anti-immigrant, although there's a segment of the population that thinks that we need to shut off immigration for a period of time until we can get things in order. And even though I'm waiting for my wife, I'm sympathetic to that idea. I hope my wife gets here first, obviously. But I understand why people feel that way. And I think there's valid concern because we currently don't have enough houses to house all the people that live here in our state, according to my understanding, in our state and our country. But so there's an element there where it's about the issues about immigration. The issue is about making sure that the people who come here assimilate, these types of things. Mm-hmm. But there's also like, because of the fact that you one of the things that you highlighted, do you think they would ever not prosecute an American born, or we'll just say a white dad who essentially statutorily raped his daughter and had a baby by it? There's no way they would not arrest that person, right?
I'm glad you asked that question, Chuck, because as I'm standing in the lobby of the hotel, losing my mind over what has happened, in the last hour and a half as this has all transpired. When, the Marlborough Police Department in Massachusetts is saying, yeah, just order him an Uber and ship him off to Worcester. I'm like, what are you talking about? And keep in mind, like I said, I was the chairman of the board of selectmen for a long time. I kind of know how things, work. And I said, if this was me, what would you do? And he's like, if it was you, you'd be in handcuffs and I'd be taking you to the station. I said, well, why is this different? Because the governor wants to keep this out of the press. That's why it's different. Right. That is the problem. That is the problem.
Well, exactly.
Nothing more.
And the problem is, right, because you've got this different standard for, we'll say native born people or white people, right? Not just white people, but particularly white people. And I'm not going anywhere near like like the kind of the crazy people. But like there is a reality that there is a different standard, and people see it. Right. And this is actually what leads people to become racist. And I think this is what they want. They want us to get upset with the immigrants and black people and whatever Hispanic people, rather than being upset with who the real enemy is, to quote the Hunger Games and Katniss Everdeen and stuff like that. Remember who the real enemy is. And the enemy there is the capital. The enemy for us is the government who's making these policies, because the government and the people that are running the government are profiting off of this. And they're using people. And so these other people, yes, there's a different standard. Yes, that guy absolutely should have immediately been arrested. But like what's happening is they're trying to create division. So we're stuck focused on one another, and we're mad at the immigrants for being here, rather than being mad at the government who used people as pawns in order to advance an agenda that profits for them and hurts us.
What every one of these migrants got, and like I said, most of them are great people, and I sincerely mean that. What they all got was free health care, called Mass Health. They all got a Social Security number. So were they illegal? By the letter of the law, if you have a Social Security number, you're not illegal. But they were given Social Security numbers to make this narrative work. And why were they given all of that? So they would vote. And I would deliver the mail almost every day to everybody's room, and I slid a lot of voter registration and voter ID things underneath people's doors. And that's the whole reason why they did it. And I appreciate you bringing up the fact, because I went to the state and said, hey, listen, we have a culture problem. And, and I have to be fair, Chuck, because I always try to be fair and see, everybody's side. If I went to Haiti, I probably wouldn't like the food. I think that's pretty fair, right? They didn't like the food that, we were providing. We were basically providing hotel banquet food every day. And people would say, oh, they're getting 3 meals a day. Why are they complaining? Well, here's the reality. They didn't like the food. And I could understand, because if I went to Haiti, I probably wouldn't like the food either. So what I suggested to the state is, like, we need to bring in like culture experts and say, hey, in America, you can't sit in your car in a hotel parking lot and drink. In America, you can't smack your kids. In America, you can't leave your kids unattended. In America, you're probably smart to learn English, and this is why you want to learn English and stuff like that. You would have thought I was Satan for bringing any of this up. How dare you bring that up, John? How dare you say stuff like that? They would be afraid of a police officer coming in uniform talking to them. They would be afraid if they want to learn English, then that's on them. But we shouldn't push that on them. And I'm like, so you're saying we have a whole bunch of rules that apply to Chuck and John, but they don't apply to the immigrants? Well, they've been through a lot. And when I would push back on a lot of these people, you'd be like, oh, so when did you leave Haiti? Oh, 10 years ago. What do you mean 10 years ago? Well, I left after the earthquake in Haiti, which was a horrible experience. It's not like they left, in the calendar year and were escaping political oppression. They went to Chile first, and they were content in Chile, but they had to work in Chile. So they went to Brazil, and they were very happy in Brazil. And it was interesting to me. Your kid speaks pretty good English. Your kid speaks very good Portuguese, but they don't speak Haitian Creole. Why is that? Well, because they were born in Brazil and they were assimilated in Brazil. And they went to school in Brazil. Oh, okay. So why'd you come to America? Well, Joe Biden invited us, told us everything was free. Well, what are you going to, and I would have candid conversations with him. What are you going to do if Trump becomes president? We'll just leave. What do you mean you'll just leave? Well, we'll figure it out. Well, will you go back to Haiti? No, we'll go somewhere else. But once the free stuff was gone and they realized that it probably won't end up being free forever, they'll just move along. So this diabolical plan by the Democrats to bring people just here to vote is now going to even backfire on them as well, too, because they're not loyal voters. They weren't engaged, knowledgeable voters. And I don't think most of them voted either. So, I mean, just another, Biden plan that, has been proven not to work.
It's wild. It's just one of those things that it's so hard to imagine. Like if growing up in America, and living through the 90s, living through going to college in the 2000s, and just seeing what America has been in the past. It's so hard to see and imagine how in the world we got to the place that we're at, that like this is, I mean, it's irrefutable that this is what their plan was and this is what they were doing. And somehow we were able to successfully overcome it in the short term. Let's hope we can continue in the long term. But it's just,
are you confident? I'm not.
What?
We started the podcast today talking about the dysfunction and everything like that.
Yeah.
There's some blame to go around on the Republican end of all of this, though, too. Like,
absolutely.
Like, the best thing Trump has done is he secured the southern border, but you can't convince the northern borders as secure as the southern border is. So, take your victory parade and say the southern border is closed. Good. Thank you, Mr. President. Now secure the northern border, because we still have problems. And, the Republicans haven't been perfect. The Republicans have played a lot of role in getting us to this point as we are, too. And more importantly, they're not stepping up. And they're not supporting the police. They're not supporting local law enforcement. They're waffling on the ICE enforcement issue. You can't go half in on these issues. You're either in or you're out. And
the GOP, you're saying nationally, the GOP is not supporting law enforcement. They're not supporting ICE.
I'm not saying that they're not.
They're not doing enough.
They're not doing enough. Yes. I mean, the Biden administration was openly anti-police, defund police, anti this. But do you see a lot of it on the GOP level? That there is a lot of. I mean,
no, I see it right now. I see a lot of infighting. Honestly, right. I see a lot of unfortunately, and this really bothers me. I wrote something up. We'll see if I post it on the Tucker Carlson interview of Nick Fuentes, for instance. And so I see people taking this somehow this is being used as an opportunity to attack JD Vance, because JD Vance basically backed Tucker Carlson. And so Ted Cruz apparently is using this as an opportunity to try to launch get some notoriety and maybe have a potential 2028 campaign. And let me just be frank. Tucker Carlson said nothing anti-Semitic. I'm tired of the rhetoric that I keep hearing from people suggesting that he said anything anti-Semitic. I actually argued with Grok because I wanted to I was like, what are people saying? Why are they saying it? And all the justifications, I broke them down. I was like, no. Saying those, that's not anti-Semitic. And then afterwards, Grok's, oh, you're right. It could be interpreted that way it's like there are all these, it is not, he is not anti-Semitic. In fact, he starts off his interview with Nick Fuentes by saying racism is a sin and is antithetical to my Christian faith. By the way, anti-Semitism is racism, period, full stop. He's having a conversation. Honestly, what he did there is he let everybody see what Fuentes is and why people are drawn to him. By letting him speak about what he believes, which I think is a lot of what Fuentes believes. I think is antithetical to the Christian worldview and the American worldview.
You bring up probably my biggest emotional button when it comes to talking about Republicans. Like I said, I came from Massachusetts. I was part of the Massachusetts miracle when Scott Brown got elected and defeated, and then was defeated by with Warren. And it really opened my eyes that, you got to give credit where credit is due. Democrats do it pretty well. They pick their candidate, they have their succession plan, they do everything behind closed doors, and they stick to the agenda. What Republicans often do are their own worst enemies. Will criticize, even this battle between Green and the president right now. Okay, do that in the Oval Office. Do that in the Lincoln bedroom, have your conversation behind a closed. Don't do it in public. And then, like you were saying, this thing now with Tucker Carlson, and it's just Republicans need to be smart. Okay, don't air your dirty laundry in public. Don't air your fights in public. We have to be unified. We have to be all in on the same goal, and we have to do that because Trump presidency's only got 3 years left, and then
Yeah.
we don't want to go back to what we had before because it's going to be even worse, don't you think? Like,
Well, unfortunately, one of the problems to kind of highlight what you're saying, right, or emphasize is Republicans, and I feel like I see this here in the state of Maine. I'm not going to get into that into too much detail at the moment, but I feel like I see this in the state of Maine, but I also see it nationally, right, where there's this we want to win if I'm the president. Right? Like rather than recognizing that what we need to be doing are things that are lifting the whole ticket. And then whoever ends up being the one that rises to the top as part of that ticket will great. Instead, there are all these different purity tests that, like, you've got people in the MAGA movement who have. I remember actually when the situation when the U.S. bombed Iran. The conversation was there was half of the people were basically suggesting that MAGA, being MAGA means that you trust Trump and you never doubt him in any way. And other people were like, wait, we voted for Trump because he was not in favor of wars, and there was a lot of concern that this was going to end up leading to a long-term war. And there was this division within MAGA, half of the group saying that the other half wasn't MAGA, rather than I think behaving like adults. It looks like we lost you for a bit. But anyway, we take these things that happen. Thanks for coming back. And we end up like getting into fights. And again, during I was talking about the Iran thing. I don't know how much you heard about it, but basically that like when Trump bombed Iran, where people were concerned about us potentially escalating and going into a war, and other people were trusting Trump because they believe in him. Right. And there was like no space to have those two different perspectives. There was no, I totally understand why you're concerned. This is a big this is a big power, and this could lead to further, but we don't believe it will because Trump. It was just like, we're going to attack each other. Right. Rather than being more rational. If that makes sense.
I can't stand it. I can't stand it. We do more damage than we realize when we do that. And we need to get better.
We do need to get better, and we need to be focused on making sure that whatever happens, we like the main objective is that the Conservative Party, the people, because even if the Republican who's elected isn't the best possible Republican that we think in our way, what is going to put us in the best position? Like, it would be one thing if we had like 70% of the population was with us. Then it's like then fight for the one that you think most closely aligns with you. But when your objective is just to win, like we are heading into 2026 here in the state of Maine, let's just do whatever we can to help the party, and whoever is the best candidate that gives us the best chance of winning, that's who we get behind.
Maine has a leadership problem. Maine needs a leader. The next governor needs to be a leader. And one man's opinion. I mean, I would love him to be as fiscally conservative as I am. I would love them to be as just conservative as I am. But you know what? If they're just a leader with integrity and cares about people, that's what we need. That's what we need. If anything you can see from like the Trump administration is you just have to be bold, you just have to be brave, and you just have to stand by your convictions, and that's what we're going to need. But I've always said, like my X handle is all politics is local. Maine also needs to build the bench. You've got to get people on your local boards of health that are of a conservative mind. They don't have to be, ultra conservative, but you need somebody on your school committee. You need somebody on your town council. You need somebody on your city council. You need somebody on your board of selectmen. And if you don't build that bench, there is no future. There really is no future. And now is the time to do it. And that's where, even the Maine GOP really needs to step up and start their recruiting methods. Hey, you're always going to find a governor candidate. You're always going to find a U.S. Senate candidate. But you're not always going to find a local board of selectmen candidate. You're not going to always find a school committee candidate. And that's where, in my opinion, Maine GOP needs to really start focusing. Build that bench. Is it hard work? Hell yes, it's hard work. Does it take a long time? Yes, it does. But does it pay off? Absolutely, it does. And that's what they need to do, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. It's one of the areas where, I entered into politics in 2022. That's when I kind of started running for office. I made the decision in late 2021. And wasn't really focused on what was going on here at the state level and all that other kind of stuff. But over time, obviously, this is one of the things that I've realized is this, again, you build your bench with school board, city council, mayor, and you work your way up, right? And these are the people who end up being the best candidates for House and Senate are the people that are known, people have already voted for them, people already know, like, and trust them. These are the best. And we as a movement and a party just have not focused enough on that. And from a statewide level, this is one thing that the Maine GOP would be wise to heed, which is that there should be some official thing from the Maine GOP. And I don't mean the county committees and I don't mean the city committees. There should be some sort of organizing and support from the Maine GOP, and there currently is not, to help get school board and city council people elected. That should be part of what happens as part of our apparatus. Now, again, the local committees do work together with that, the city committees, but there's nothing kind of top down that's happening, and that's a mistake. And there's no like serious emphasis on that, because like you're right, that is how we build our bench. The only people that do recruiting for candidates are for the state house and the state senate. And many times the Senate candidates are recruited from the House, and then the House has to go out. And right now they're actually in a better situation where they're very coordinated between the House and the Senate recruitment offices, but it wasn't always that way. But either way, like we don't have anything that's really heavily focused on from an official Maine GOP standpoint. There are organizations out there. I'm not as familiar with the Maine First Project. I know that it exists. Larry Lockman, I believe, is his name, who runs that. And I believe one of the things that they try to work on are school board races. And then there's also really a combination of parental rights and education, Maine Civic Action, and Maine Education Initiative that is focused on school boards. And I think Maine Civic Action is also focused on a city council, but not. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a lot of emphasis there. This is a problem, from an organizational standpoint. These are, and like, again, I'm not saying the Maine GOP doesn't talk about this, and they'll say this is what the county and the town should be focused on. But I do think that more support and more energy and more focus around these things from a top-down standpoint is like,
well, from an outside
essential.
From an outsider looking in, and a person who went to numerous 10 polling locations on election day, I did not see a lot of GOP support for the ballot initiatives. I didn't see a lot of people holding signs. I'm not saying I didn't see people holding signs, because I did, but I didn't see a lot of people. And that is how you can often take a temperature of where you're at, is like, how much support is there? How much activism is there? Hate to bring a Star Wars reference into this, but I'm a big Star Wars guy. What does Yoda say? Do or don't do. Like, there is no try. Either do or don't. And that's kind of where you are. And that's where I say, with what Maine needs is a leader right now. Let's talk about the boys and girls sports, because there's a good thing going on this Saturday. You're aware that Riley Gaines is coming?
I am, yeah. I'd heard that. Sadly, I will be attending a funeral, but it's good family member. Sadly, recently passed away. I did get to see her before she went, but that's where I'm going to be with family. But I was I was really hoping. I bought a ticket in hopes that would end up being on Sunday and I would still be able to go. But really, really great event. I highly recommend if people are able to find their way to tickets. If you know me,
the Maine Wire will be covering it live on Facebook, and I'll be there to report on it as well. But what I'm saying is, if you had a leader in Augusta, get out of my office. Get out of my office with that crap. 80-20 rule, as we always say. I think it's pretty safe to say that 80% of the voting population, and probably more of the fathers, they don't want boys and girls sports. It should have never got to this level, because get out of my office with that. Go try to put it in a committee. Go try to do something, but take that stuff, get out of my office. And that's what you're lacking right now. Not just in Maine. You're lacking that in town halls. You're lacking that in state houses all across the country, is people run for politics because they get publicity, they get their picture in the newspaper and stuff. We really have a void of leadership in this country. And that's where we need leaders to sit there and say, you know what? That's a stupid idea. Get out of my office. Or I don't agree with you on everything. Let's meet next Tuesday and, I'll bring my team and you bring your team and let's work towards the middle right now. Show me where that's happening right now. And it's not, but it needs to.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I would love to pick your brain. Obviously, you've been involved in politics for quite a while, but I'll leave that for a later date. We'll have to have you come on another time. But are there any other kind of more not, I don't know if breaking stories, but like recent stories that are worth talking about briefly? Today.
Well, it's not a breaking story, but it's a story that's, Steve Robinson has been working on effortlessly with, since he started, working with the Maine Wire, is people need to pay attention to this Chinese problem that you have in Maine. Not just the triad weed and not just, the gas store, marijuana and stuff like that. But, we talked about the immigration thing, why are Chinese people coming into the state and just buying up properties in rural Maine and then abandoning their properties and stuff like that? I'll be the first one, and I've said this to Steve, I don't completely understand all of it. And, Steve does because he's done such great, research on it. But people need to start paying attention because even when I went to the No Kings rally in Portland and I was talking to people and they're like, hey, you're a reporter. Wait a minute, you're a conservative reporter at a No Kings rally. But I was talking to people about like the weed situation. A lot of people just don't know that it's going on. And, full disclosure, I kind of get an ice cream headache sometimes, digging deep into it. But that's how much of a problem it is, that it's a huge problem. And most people don't know about it. And they need to be aware about it. They're not going to become an expert like, Steve Robinson is. But pay attention. Go to the Maine Wire website and click on, to the bottom and scroll to the bottom and click on the triad weed story and educate yourself a little bit about it. I mean, you'll be impressed by the work he's done, and then you'll also be horrified by what he's found. So,
yeah, it's definitely a huge problem on so many different levels. One is like the toughest things that they're doing with the marijuana in terms of the ways in which they're kind of like making it dangerous for people to consume. I think part of the reason I think some people don't dig into it is they're like, what are you talking about? Marijuana is legal now. What's the big deal about like It's like some people don't see it as big of a deal as it is when, there are so many different levels. One is economic and they're really stealing business from Maine marijuana grows. Two is they're like buying residential property that human beings can live in at a time where we don't have enough of that, and they're destroying those properties. They're also playing games with the electricity and making it look like they're using a lot less electricity than they're using, which guess what? That means the rest of us are paying for it. So one of the reasons your energy prices are going up are because of these. Obviously there's the organized crime and human trafficking element of it, which many of the people that are working in there have been human trafficked into the country and are not able to leave. They can't speak the language. And some of them are winding up dead because of rivalries between different Chinese gangs, it sounds like. And those are just a few like of the things that I've picked up from listening to the interview that he did with Tucker, watching the documentary itself. It's just well worth digging into if you haven't already. But yeah, I just want to thank you for, first of all, coming to Maine. I mean, Maine's a bit of a crazy place, and especially like
we're happy to be here. My wife and I couldn't be happier to be here, so we're happy to be here. So
yeah, well, and also making the decision to it sounds like you weren't a journalist before you came here.
I've always dabbled in long career in radio and TV, but I was never really a print journalist. But to be in radio and TV, you've got to write. So it's been an interesting transformation. But yes, yeah, but.
Yeah, well, we appreciate it. I remember like we really liked and we're sad to see Ed Tomich go, but have appreciated getting the opportunity to get to know you and seeing that all is not lost because Ed is gone, but for now anyway. But yeah, I just appreciate you kind of doing some of the difficult stuff, because you cover the craziest part of the state, I believe, primarily the greater Portland area. And while there's a lot of fireworks, there's also potential danger. I remember I went to a rally for Graham Plattner, and I was just walking around beforehand, partly because I was going to go on the radio with Aaron Chadbourne, because he was covering for Howie Carr that day. I remember being there and just feeling uncomfortable and feeling like, man, if they knew who I was and what my views were, they would. I just think that community can be a little rabid, and so
I've been
willing
to a lot of Plattner rallies, and I don't understand. I'm going to a Plattner rally tomorrow night, Wednesday night in Biddeford. He's having one at the middle school in Biddeford. I would love to come back on and talk to you about Graham Plattner and like what, how, why, what is going on, and am I really rooting for Janet Mills? So. Did I ever think I would say that out of my mouth? But the Plattner thing is like, we could spend hours talking about that next time. But Chuck, I want to thank you, because if you weren't doing this, the word wouldn't be getting it. And I know it's not always easy, and it takes some time and it takes an effort. But it's guys like you that are really making the difference. Media's changed, and this is important. And words matter and videos matter, and kudos to you for sticking to this and making this work, and I commend you for all of your hard work, and you are making a difference. So don't ever let anybody tell you that you're not. So
well, thanks. I appreciate your kind words. It is not easy to do this, but at the same time, I feel like I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think that it had worth and value, and was going to be, I think, impactful, in particular in the long run here in Maine. There are a lot of other people, and I just thought to myself, like, where do we need some more? It's more help as a movement, and this is a space where I feel like one of the things I don't know, I think people tend to tell me that I am, but I can talk, I guess, is the short version, and I can communicate in a way in which people want to listen to what I have to say, generally speaking, not always. But I used to have these moments in my office at the bank that I used to work at. I would, like, some issue would come up, and I would come out and just feel like I had to explain it to somebody and talk about the crazy, stupid thing that was happening over here. And people would you should do a podcast. And I was like, okay, that's funny, but no. And now here we are.
Oh, great. You're making a difference. You really are. So keep it up.
We try. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. One of the ways that we grow this, it seems simple and silly, I think, to hear everybody, all these podcasters and these people who are like, share, and subscribe and comment. But these types of things really help with the algorithms and help people be able to get the news and realize what's actually going on in our world by hearing the different stories by people around Maine on what is really happening that the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear about. And so please be sure to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Substack, where anywhere you can. But good place for the shorts. The shorts are probably the best thing to share because those are the easiest, most consumable. So Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok are probably the best places for those. But yeah, thank you all, and we'll see you back here tomorrow when we have the chair or the president of the College Republicans, Zach Asplin, will be talking about the goings on at Bowdoin and what it's like for him coming here from Britain and realizing he's more pro-American than Americans.
He's a very impressive young man. He will definitely outshine my performance here.
I don't know. we'll see. He does have the accent, which you can't compete with. But yeah, so we'll see you all here tomorrow. Thanks again, John. Have a great night.